why is it that for the first time ever, Tory party are set to complete failure?
Yes, I mean, the polling is very consistent on this. They look set to go well below 30%. They've never gone below 30% before. And when you look into the detail of the polling, we have lots of polling from lots of different opinion polling companies, you see a really consistent pattern. Rishi Sunak has the worst prime ministerial approval ratings of any prime minister that there is polling for. The share of voters who say the government is doing a bad job is the highest that it has ever been. The share of voters who say the government is doing a bad job on each specific issue is exceptionally high, and the share of voters saying the government deserves to be re-elected is exceptionally low. And put that all together, people get, one of the polls says Ipsos Mori asks people, do you think it's time for a change, or does the government deserve re-election? And getting on for 7 out of 10 voters say it's time for a change. So the pattern is not just in the voting figures, it's across all the factors that might explain the voting figures as well.
Why is that, Anand? Is it to do with Rishi Sunak himself, or more to do with the other things?
Well, I think there are loads of factors. I mean, if you zoom out, it's quite hard to win an election when you've been in power for 14 years because people start thinking in terms of a change. Secondly, it's quite hard to win an election when you've presided over a massive cost of living crisis. But added to that are things that, if you like, the Conservatives have done to themselves. You had Partygate, which saw a significant drop in support for the Conservatives, and then you had the Liz Truss mini budget. So it's problem layered upon problem, I think, that have left them in the situation they're in now.
If you could name one Tory leader who had dented the party most, who would that be?
Liz Truss. I mean, there's no doubt about it. She broke all sorts of records. If you look at the graph of polling for the Conservatives and leader approval for Liz Truss, it is literally a cliff face. Never seen a plunge like it. Never in the history of polling have more people turned against a leader in a party in less time than happened in the 6 weeks that Liz Truss was in charge. It was simply incredible how bad she was.
Indeed. And she still wanted to come back.
Yeah, and she might well make it.
That is the funny part of the politics.
Everybody deserves a second chance, but that's really pushing that principle to a limit.
Indeed. Okay, you said Rishi Sunak has the lowest ever. And why is that? How has he done as a prime minister in the time, and what he was given with?
The best way of summing up the problem that Rishi Sunak has is he was dealt a very bad hand, in particular by Liz Truss, but also by Boris Johnson through Partygate, and by being in charge of a party that's been in charge for an awfully long time. Those were all things out of his control. But any card player will tell you you can play a good hand, a bad hand well or a bad hand badly, and he's taken this bad hand and played it very poorly. He hasn't been able to find any kind of messaging to turn things around for voters. He hasn't been able to deliver on his key pledges. He hasn't been able to persuade voters that are naturally on the Conservative side of the spectrum to stick with him. So he started with a very bad inheritance, but he hasn't been able to make it any better, which is not good leadership.
Okay. Has his origins, do his origins impact at all the way he's viewed?
No, not to any great extent at all, I don't think.
Not at all.
And that is remarkable.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, it's a tribute.
It's a tribute to how the country has changed. I mean, if you were to take the people in this room that we've just been talking to and put them, take the ones who would be in an equivalent room in the 1970s and put them in this room and announce to them that we would have an Indian origin, second generation Hindu prime minister, and it would be a total non-issue with everybody, with his party, with the voters. They would never have believed you, but that's actually what we're seeing.
In terms of, we know Labour is going to be a Labour win. What extent is to be decided? Am I right to say that, first of all, before I move on?
I think so, yes, because even if we saw the biggest ever late swing in the final weeks of the campaign, or the biggest ever error in the history of opinion polling, it would still at this point be a Labour win. It would just be a narrower Labour win. So I think it's pretty likely, yes.
What is it that Labour can do, which Tory have not been able to? Would they be able to deal better with the situation that it is?
I mean, I suppose the one thing that Keir Starmer will have going for him is he will have a large majority and a party that is relatively united, at least to start with. I mean, one of the problems that Conservative prime ministers have had, apart from the fact that they were contradictions in the 2019 manifesto, are we in favour of investment or low taxes, that came out and haunted Rishi Sunak, was the parliamentary party was quite divided on ideological grounds about the basics of economic policy. So that, I think, will be easier for Keir Starmer, but the actual nature of the practical economic problems he faces are about as bad as I can remember for any incoming Prime Minister.
Indeed. Now, in terms of India policy, we have had the third, even the coalition, a government that has had the same Prime Minister for the third time. And considering Labour's shaky relationship with the Indian origin people because of Jeremy Corbyn, how do you see the India policy panning out under Labour?
Well, I think Labour have made it absolutely clear that they want very good, close, strong ties with India. A lot of senior shadow cabinet members went out to India a few months ago and were very explicit about this. I mean, and it's not just sort of cynical electioneering. This isn't simply about Indian electorates at home. I think across the West, given shifting perceptions about China, the importance of having a strong relationship with India is increasingly felt. So they will go out and try and have as close a relationship with India as possible. I mean, one of the big tests of that, of course, is going to be whether they make any progress on this fabled trade deal. But of course, the problem with this trade deal is very wrapped up with quite sensitive political issues like immigration.